All right, welcome everybody. Got a clicker? All right, cool. So I'm Mark Hemelainen. No, just kidding. Mark couldn't be here today because his boss wouldn't let him come. I won't name names, but maybe if this guy cared more about longevity, then Mark could have made it. So who am I? My name is Kris. I'm an entrepreneur with a background in robotics and AI. And these days I invest in longevity companies and I work on longevity technology. So now I'm going to fill in for Mark and Nathan and give you an introduction to the Longevity Biotech Fellowship's Longevity Acceleration Roadmap. And for those who don't know, the LBF is the most hardcore anti-aging organization in the world. And the roadmap is LBF's high-level plan to keep people who are alive today from aging to death. If that sounds good to you, then please pay close attention, because during the course of this presentation, 3,000 people will die, and your own personal hourglass will have a bit less sand at the top. So however you look at it, this is a very urgent problem. But on the bright side, we're trying to do something cooler than spaceships and more valuable than crypto, if you can believe that, and more revolutionary than AI. We're trying to save the lives of billions of people. And normally that only happens in movies. Well, guess what we're doing? It's happening right now, and you can be a part of it. So what can we do? Well, there's no diet or exercise that will make you live forever, and there are no current interventions on the market that will meaningfully extend your lifespan. Why not? Because human biology is super complex. We can't even make drugs that cure simple diseases, and aging is even more complicated than human biology because it can alter each thing in this graph in many different ways. 20th century approaches won't save us. How many drugs would you need to take to solve aging? Probably more pills than you can eat in a day. We need new strategies, and this isn't just our opinion. We surveyed 400 professionals in the field, and you can see the survey data here. But what's the upshot? Why can't we solve aging with biotech right now? Well, not enough data. We don't have the models and computational power we would need, and not nearly enough money is going to things that might actually be solutions. Some people think we're kind of close, since we have drugs that modify health span and lifespan in model animals, but we can't even make mice live forever. Ray Kurzweil isn't here, so I can pick on him a little bit. He says in one of his books that calorie restriction is the only proven method for extending lifespan in animals. But if you survey the studies, sometimes it helps and sometimes it kills you faster. Don't we already have a plan to solve aging? Well, not really. We have strategies like SENS and a few others. Aubrey de Grey also isn't here, so I can pick on him a little. He laid out a plan of attack 17 years ago. And when I read his book 5 years ago, I was inspired to join the movement. But the simplicity of the SENS categories hides some deep complexity. And while there has been progress in each area, we haven't even been able to fix the easy ones yet. Allotopic expression of mitochondrial DNA is 15% complete, and that's assuming we can solve the delivery problem. Many other groups have put together ways of thinking about aging and what approaches they care about, but there wasn't one that quite did what we needed. What we needed was a plan where LBF could say, these are our best shots, and here's what people can work on right now to move them forward. A plan that could help us recruit the right people, make sure everyone's rowing in the right direction, and bring in funding. That kind of plan needs to be direct, nothing that only has tangential value. You could say there are thousands hacking at the branches of aging to one that is striking at the root. It also needs to be specific, not specific like a type of aging damage, but specific in what are the key milestones to make progress. And it also has to be actionable. When someone decides they want to help with longevity or radical life extension, we can say, cool, go develop artificial wombs, because we're going to need those to grow human clones pretty soon. And we'll talk about that later. So here's the plan. We work on 3 areas in parallel: biostasis, replacement, and bioengineering. Biostasis means freezing yourself until aging is solved in the future. Replacement means swapping out old body parts with new ones. And bioengineering means reprogramming your body not to age. These are not just plausible solutions, they're really the only hope for people living today. Nothing else is going to work. And they're actually in order of how soon they can bring benefits, and in inverse order of how pleasant the therapies are. So we'd all prefer to get some gene therapy that keeps us alive at 25 years old forever. And being frozen for 300 years beats being dead, but isn't that appealing otherwise? So to understand why we picked these 3, consider 2 ways of looking at any individual strategy. First, does it just buy time, or does it solve aging completely? Second, do you need to understand biology to implement it, or is it an engineering problem? So bioengineering and replacement are solutions, but drugs and biostasis just buy you time. Replacement and biostasis circumvent the need to understand human biology. They get kind of a shortcut. Drugs and bioengineering require lots more money and effort. So from this perspective, it should be clear that we should be shifting resources away from pharma and into more efficient strategies on the right and more complete solutions on top. So is pharma really not worth any time or attention? Well, you can make money there, but you can't solve aging. The whole reason you age is because your body does not have mechanisms for dealing with the damage that accumulates over time. So drugs that modulate your body's activity cannot fix the underlying problems, and drugs that directly target damage are woefully underpowered compared to bioengineering. But this happens to be where a lot of the money is going today, which is a bit of a problem. What about AI? Will AI save us? I'm not a leader in the field of AI, but I do have some leader of expertise, and I can tell you that while AI is going to help, it won't solve the problem on its own, and it won't accelerate progress so much that we can kick back and relax. But don't take it from me, take it from this guy. He knows quite a bit about what AI can do and what it's going to do in the near future, and he's dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into longevity as we speak. So AI is great, but it's just another tool, and we have to do the work, and we need to work on things that will work. So for the first thing that will work, biostasis, we can put biology on hold by freezing you or chemically fixing the molecules in your body. It doesn't keep you alive, but my motto is if you're going to die, die in the most reversible way possible. So this is a real service, and hundreds of people have already done it. And if someone you love is going to die in the next 10 years, it's probably their best option. If that wasn't crystal clear, let me say it again. There's only one solution available right now, and it's biostasis. And nobody knows when we're going to get a better option. That said, cryonics seems to be working reasonably well, and there's a ton of low-hanging fruit. So even if your time horizon is short, you could still have a big impact on this field by investing and working in biostasis. The big ideas in biostasis are first, high-quality preservation, meaning your body is stored in a revivable state. In other words, freeze people while doing as little damage as possible while they're getting cooled down. Because the less damage done to the body, the easier it'll be to revive you. And the sooner you can be warmed back up. The second, methods for revival, which is not super urgent to the people in biostasis, but would help convince a lot more people that this is a real thing and they should do it. So you'd save a lot more people. Okay, so what do we need to do to take biostasis from good to great? First, figure out how to measure preservation quality so we can tell how well our tech is working and improve it. Find faster ways to cool people down. Better antifreeze, which is known as cryoprotectant. Develop methods for rapid, even rewarming so we don't damage your tissues during revival. And some bioengineering to optimize your body for the process would be great too. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over a bunch of details. But find me later if you'd like to hear about all the crazy stuff that happens when you take human bodies down to liquid nitrogen temperatures and then back up. All right, so how are things going with cryo? We've made a lot of progress. People can be cooled down without causing too much damage to their brain, as far as we know. And we've been able to freeze and rewarm things like rat kidneys. And then afterwards, they work just fine. Rat kidneys are much smaller and easier to freeze and rewarm than people, but it's a start. And hopefully Ralph can give us an update tomorrow on how things are going. So who's working on it? A couple groups, but not nearly enough. So if you're interested, I encourage you to jump in. And one important thing about biostasis is how much money does this strategy need? Maybe $10 billion over 10 years. That's like $3 for each person that could be saved, which seems like a great deal to me. And actually, most of the benefit could be had for only a couple $100 million. So this is a very efficient place to invest, as long as you measure your returns in human lives. So in summary, biostasis is already available for purchase. It seems to work pretty well, and it wouldn't take that much money or effort to make it great. All right, next up, my personal favorite, replacement. Replacement is uniquely positioned as a strategy that could solve aging and also does not require us to understand all of human biology. So it's maybe the best chance for radical life extension in our lifetimes. It works because every human cell has the natural ability to develop into young, healthy tissue. Babies do this all the time. And we can leverage that without understanding how it works. It also solves every problem in whatever tissue you replace. It doesn't matter if you damaged how damaged your arm is, or if you have 10 different tumors. If you cut it off and put in a young, healthy one, all the problems go away, including aging. And This actually happens every day on a small scale. When doctors can't figure out how to cure a liver with drugs, they just swap in a new one. We just need to scale replacement up from individual organs to a whole body, and then scale the technology to serve the whole population. This is something that could be ready far ahead of bioengineering, and could let many people who are over the age of 20 skip going on ice. So replacement's my specialty, and if you'd like me to talk your ear off, find me later. So what's the high-level plan? You could try to replace organs individually, but surgeries are risky and expensive, so it's safer to just do one surgery and get a new body from the neck down, and then figure out what to do about the brain. For body transplants, you need to clone yourself, but modify the clone so it doesn't grow a brain, and then you'd remove your old body and stick on a new one. For the brain, things are a little trickier. You'd have to replace small bits at a time, maybe cells, maybe bits of tissue, so the brain has time to adapt and move memories and functions around. But there's been some interesting work there as well. Okay, so just like replacing organs, there's work to do to get parts and how to figure out how to install them. So we need to create a supply of donor tissue, bodies, organs, etc., and also create surgical protocols for doing the transplantation. And that's the same thing for the brain. We need a source of cells or brain tissue, and then ways to get them where they need to go in your head. So for bodies, specifically, we would need bioengineering techniques for brain knockout. It's great if you can do clones, but if they have brains and have personalities, you can't harvest any organs or tissues from them. Also, we need pretty big improvements in human cloning efficiency. Right now, cloning animals does not work so well. If you try to clone an animal, maybe 1 out of 100 would work, and it's even worse for humans and non-human primates. And even if you can do clones, we need ectogenesis technology. So artificial wombs are ways to grow these bodies outside of the womb. Brain replacement, like I said, is much harder, and we don't really have a full strategy for brain replacement, but there's been some initial progress on how to replace the neocortex and some work in animals. So how's the science coming along? Cloning is getting better. We have a number of techniques for brain knockout. Remember that guy? He developed some strategies for replacing volumes of brain tissue, so like slowly silencing parts of the brain and then putting in new tissue, and that seems to be promising. And then what about projects? We've got groups working on cells, bodies, surgeries, but many of them don't want attention right now. So if you want to get in touch with them, let me know and I'll introduce you. It's kind of sad that these people have to stay underground because the tech they're developing could save so many lives, but when you're working on kind of the edge of what's possible, it can upset a lot of people. All right, so like biostasis, getting this working well might cost $10 billion over 10 years. But you could do the body portion of it for maybe 1/10 of that, which I think would be a steal. And I imagine there are people who would pay $1 billion to have a young body. So if you're listening, the radical life extension industry is accepting pre-orders. So in summary, replacement is our best hope for radical life extension in our lifetimes. Body transplants are realistic, brains harder, but we've got ideas, and the costs are pretty reasonable. And we could actually start saving lives in a decade. All right, last but not least, bioengineering. What we're all waiting for is a gene therapy that keeps us young and healthy, but we're going to be waiting for a while. So bioengineering will work in principle. We just need to understand a lot more about human biology, and then come up with better tools for changing it, and then take large numbers of gene therapies through clinical trials. So to get there, we need data, models, tools, and delivery solutions. There are lots of projects going on in this area, lots of companies that are doing cool stuff. Oop, did we go? Yeah. And if you're in this to make money, this is a good place to do it because bioengineering is just so much more powerful than small molecules. So just how AI is transforming information technology, bioengineering is going to revolutionize medicine. But if your goal is to solve aging, we'll do it quickly. We need all of these things to accelerate and to converge. So there's a lot to do here. So this means many mountains to climb, because all of these are major challenges that could each individually cost tens or hundreds of billions of dollars and take decades. Let me go over them real quick for you. So on the data side, we've got pretty good results from leveraging big data. We've been able to make good use of, for example, the protein data bank that led to AlphaFold, but getting sufficient quantities of good data is expensive and slow. And these data sources can cost billions of dollars to pull together. So When we ask artificial superintelligence to solve aging, it's going to say error, insufficient data. So we might as well start collecting that data now. Mark had this idea that we could use X-ray free electron lasers to collect lots of data. I think they're pretty cool technology. Maybe they could help us generate lots of raw data about cells that could lead to breakthroughs. On delivery, current results are not so good. So ideally, you want to be able to give each cell one edit, but currently we hit some cells multiple times, other cells we don't get any genetic edits to, and it's kind of a mess. But what can we do? Hopefully we can find a way to update cells to have mechanisms for getting further software updates, you could say. But even if we knew how to do that, how would we get the mechanism for updates into the cells in the first place? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. For models, we've got success in narrow areas like protein folding, but nothing like the full cell simulation we would need to really accelerate progress. How quickly can we get to more advanced models? There's kind of a data limitation that I mentioned, but there's also a hardware limitation, and some people estimate that we'll have the tools and capacity we need maybe in 20 years, TBD. Compared to cryo and replacement, bioengineering is extremely expensive. And 25 years is an optimistic estimate for how long it's going to take. So, if we're lucky, we'll start getting benefits in maybe 10 years from the batch of companies that are working now on bioengineering solutions. For example, Repair Bio's cholesterol degrading platform might be nice to have in 10 years whenever they get approved. And in summary, bioengineering can do amazing things, but it needs a lot of work. However, it will work eventually. And I also suspect that there'll be meaningful gains in health span along the way that'll help some lucky people get over the finish line. So let's wrap up. So overall, how are we doing on radical life extension? Survey says could be better. Resources are going to things other than aging. Funders are wasting precious time and resources on marginal products. Most rich people aren't rallying to longevity yet, as Nathan mentioned. When they do, it'll have a big impact on how many people can be saved. So if you know anyone who would be interested in hearing about longevity technology, please introduce us. Another way to look at it is funding versus potential impact. Orange is money, blue is impact. Biohacking and pharma have a lot of money and low potential. Cryo and replacement have high potential and no money. Funny, if you ask the experts how they would allocate time and resources, it's a much more reasonable distribution. And if we were doing it right, what would it look like? So, many more big initiatives, dozens of research institutes and companies, and many of them dedicated to high-impact projects like replacement and biostasis. So, key takeaways: replacement and biostasis are the biggest opportunities. Bioengineering needs a lot more data and tech development. But we have the resources, we just need a mental shift. Let's all agree to stop talking about rapamycin and instead focus on radical life extension. So take action, join the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, invest in companies working on things that have a chance to make a difference. And whatever you do, don't wait. We have a plan, but we need help. So join us and let's work together to demolish the limits of human lifespan. Thank you.
Is there any question? I'm here. Kevin is there too.
Oh, hey. So we can't even double a mouse's lifespan. Why and when we'll be able to?
I think it'll take a long time for bioengineering approaches to do it, but it'll work eventually. But say hypothetically you had an old mouse and you took a young mouse and you gave the old mouse the young mouse's body. Would the mouse live twice as long? Potentially. So there are strategies that could potentially double a mouse's lifespan if we invested in them today. So that could happen in the next couple of years, assuming you went down the road of replacement rather than bioengineering.
So in biostasis, do you kill the person by freezing them?
Not yet. Currently, the teams that will go to the hospital, legally they have to wait for you to die before they start the procedure. Hopefully, in the near future, laws will change so that they can start the procedures before the person dies, because then you'll get better preservation quality. But we need states that have, legal assisted suicide and things to adopt this sort of legal framework to improve that outcome.
Because neurons only have 2 or 3 minutes before they start to deteriorate after death.
Yeah, that's why the good cryonics companies will send a team to be at the bedside of the person who's dying so they can take over immediately as soon as death is declared.
But by the time death is declared, the brain will already have deteriorated.
There is some risk of that, but there have been companies who have been looking at brain perfusion after death, and they've found that, for example, with pigs, if you take a pig that's been dead for 6 hours and you reperfuse the brain, many, perhaps most of the cells are still viable. So it's not as dramatic as some people think, like your heart stops and then all of your brain tissue dies. It's a much more gradual process.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, great talk, man. I really liked it. I do have a question. So you did an analogy with SpaceX, which I found pretty interesting. But here's the interesting thing about SpaceX. They had this kind of like first product, which is basically hauling cargo for NASA. And it's kind of like a wedge product, so they could possibly build other things. So what would be this wedge product or project, in your opinion, if you had to build just one, in order to get this whole movement going?
Yeah, many startups are struggling with that. What is the way to do some initial commercialization to get the company rolling? So in the biostasis field, people are working on organ preservation tools and technology so that if someone dies, how do you make sure that the organ in Miami can get to New York or get to California or Thailand or wherever it needs to go? So they build technologies that work for that and also work for long-term storage of people. In replacement, there's a similar overlap between what we'd like to do for radical life extension and what people are doing today for normal transplant surgery. So if you're developing surgical techniques or medications that work for that, it'll also work for what we'd like to do. So it's possible, but you have to be creative.
I have a very quick question, sorry. I think it's intriguing to suggest, they can do the full body transplant, but I also mentioned that this will involve cloning a body and then use that body for the full body transplant. So do you envision an alternative where we would know so much about our brain that we could download our memories and then just clone the whole person and then upload the memories into the new body? So from head to toe, new body. So you don't have to do the whole chopping and putting back together.
That seems not to break any laws of physics, but I think it's so far out that it's probably not worth considering right now.
So it'd be harder.
Yeah.
They do it in altered carbon, just putting up.
Yeah.
Hey, Kris. I had a question also on the head transplant or brain transplant and wanted some clarification or how you think about, is the proposal actually for head transplant where you're like actually connecting the neck and like, someone's ears and nose and eyes in that way? Or is there reason to focus more on just the brain itself and somehow, reconnecting the brain itself?
The reason that people are focusing on the body below the neck is because the neck is a convenient place to get a huge amount of tissue for one surgery. So there's sort of a lower surgical cost to the amount of benefit you're getting. And the neck also is a nice place to operate because you get exposure to long lengths of nerves and vasculature with mainly covered by soft tissue. So the surgery is difficult but relatively easy compared to trying to work inside other parts of the body.
Just to clarify, I get that part, but I guess what I was asking is how do you compare it to just transplanting a brain? Is that also a consideration besides the head itself?
Yeah, some people have looked into brain transplant, but the surgery is so much more difficult. Trying to work within a skull and repair vasculature and nerve connections in the skull it seems orders of magnitude more difficult than just doing it the way that we've laid out in the roadmap.
Sorry, there is a question here.
Yeah, you left out a fourth alternative strategy, which is uploading, not necessarily to a human body, presumably to a computer of some sort.
Yep, that's plausible, but we tried to focus on the strategies that would be most actionable today. And mind uploading, well, possible is, we believe, further down the road than a lot of these technologies.
With another question, was it you?
Hi. Yes, I was wondering about the focus on the brain itself as the transplant or like kind of highest thing. Like, do you think that maybe the kind of spinal cord and all the other attachments off of that could also be just as important or relevant in order to maybe improve the odds of the transplant or the regrowth or whatever that happens?
Yeah, it's definitely important to consider all of the potential damage you could do during some sort of replacement surgery, because your body is your survival machine. It keeps your brain alive, and if you don't take care of all the connections down to your internal organs, you could end up dying from organ failure or something like that. So any procedure for replacement is going to have to take into account all of these different things that you're talking about. And it's looking like it'll be possible to do that without intervening directly in different parts of the body if we just intervene at the neck.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, hi. Hi, Kris. Great talk. Thank you so much. The question is that Mark last year was here, and he presented the roadmap. He presented the roadmap, and when we're thinking from the perspective that year has already passed, and we don't see that much things has changed since like a year ago presentation of Mark. He was just even using the same memes, right? And I understand that you have presented this roadmap through multiple conferences, not just here, and have been talking to multiple people and trying to, change their minds. What do you think the biggest bottleneck in the process of advertising and moving forward this roadmap to be in the same situation, not even in a year, but in a 10 year, when you just come in 10 year here and again pitching us the same roadmap, and we still don't have funding for that, and and just getting older and older and older, and eventually 30,000 people, you said, dying, 3,000 people dead every moment, right? Like every 20 minutes.
Yeah, well, as Nathan says, every year you get a year older, but we're also getting a year closer to solutions. So it may not seem from this presentation like we've made much progress, but tomorrow you're going to hear about some things that have been done in the last year that are give room for optimism.
How you measure the thing?
Well, tomorrow we're going to talk about science and some of the technological development that's been going on. But in terms of generating a movement and organizations that are going to support this kind of work, I think LBF and Vitalism and everyone here are helping to do that. So that's not my area of expertise, but we're definitely building momentum.
Hi, I have a question regarding legal aspects. How well are you supported? Did you already start it, and you know exactly what you need to have to be in place? Like, for example, when we talk about replacement, so one of the issues, when are we considering that the parts that are being replaced be in the full body? Obviously, it has another head, it has another brain. So how is it going to be all controlled? Because when we draw the line, the same goes to freezing, So how are you planning to solve it? Because there is no big investment coming until there is a certain path how we can execute all of that. For right now, I don't see legal means of execution.
Yeah, for biostasis, the various companies that are providing the service have legal structures that help protect the people who are in cryostasis. So I think they've done a pretty good job of figuring out how to ensure that people are in a good position, their patients are in a good position over the long haul. For replacement, all of this is still pretty early, so no one is bringing therapies to the clinic just yet, and nobody is doing some of the more advanced material production that you mentioned. So I don't think it's been fully resolved, and that's probably partially why a lot of these companies would not like me talking about their names or who is working on it on camera, because there's definitely going to be some negative reaction to some of this new technology, and that's part of the process that we have to work through. How do you convince people that even though something's icky, it could save a lot of lives, and we should adjust the laws and norms of society to accept new technology for the benefit of the patients who really need it. So it's a problem that we need to work on, and if you're interested, we'd love to get your help on it.
Do you want to go for the last question, Nicholas?
Yeah, I'm curious, maybe as an open question, or if you have the answer, but for all us to think about our debate, it's kind of been my experience recently that I think it can sometimes be worse to hide or be in stealth as a company, because you're still interacting with the world. And if it seems like you're something to hide, people trust you less. So I've made the experience by kind of being very open and upfront about what we're trying to do, that I haven't gotten any blowback. And the reason is, I think, because, well, at least you hear the full explanation and your story, so they can make up something in their mind what's actually happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think every company and project has to make their own decision about whether they want to be in stealth or open about it. But there is a real risk. Some people in the 20th century made attempts at surgeries and technologies like what I'm describing here. And they were met with violent reactions from people. And that's, you don't want to put yourself or your family at risk, even if what you're doing is very important for saving millions of billions of lives.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kris. It was great.
Thank you.